Yeah, I think we said it a lot last year, and it's the same thing now, just be who we are. And I mean that, like, going into the game and the way that we play. Like, don't all of a sudden start acting different now because it's game week. Players and coaches, be who we are. And in game ones, because it is the first time doing it for real, there's going to be, I don't want to say kinks, but there's things that happen that you got to work out, during the game, because it is game one. And just be a team that, plays with great poise throughout the game, no matter what's happening, good or bad. You just continue to play with poise and confidence, and then be the team that we want to be, just in our style of play and how we execute, and the effort, physicality that we want to play with.
Welcome onto the sideline, everybody. I'm Matt Dowell, joined alongside Jared Parker today, and I'm excited because this is another new unique show, but it's a new show, a new episode that we're going to be doing every single week. So every Thursday, we're going to be doing a game day preview for South Carolina football to preview Saturday, or in this case, Sunday's game day with the Gamecocks as we kind of get ready and are ready for football season. So Jared, I'm excited to change things up as the sports season changes. And today we're going to preview South Carolina versus Virginia Tech as the season opener is here, everybody. On Sunday in Atlanta, South Carolina will take on the Hokies at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We're going to be there for that game, Jared. But today, it's all about previewing this game. And I'm excited for this game. There's a lot of storylines and a lot of things to get into. We're filming this episode right after the press conference, right after the talking Wednesday. In this case, usually the press conference will be on Tuesday. This week, because of the Sunday start, it's on a Wednesday. So we're fresh out of the press room, got all of our notes, all of our talking points for this episode. We're going to preview both sides. So we're going to talk South Carolina, hear from Shane Beamer and the players. We're also going to talk Virginia Tech and their side of things. And we've got a cool interview with one of the reporters from Virginia who's going to give us some insight on the Hokies. So these game day previews are going to be in depth. They're going to be great conversations, but also, we are journalists, so they're going to be backed up by sound, by, legit facts and all of that kind of stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed these game day previews. Anyway, that's a lot of talking from me as we set the stage for South Carolina versus Virginia Tech. First, Jared, let's get into some more of the newsy type storylines regarding South Carolina. And the first one is a very serious storyline, and that's with defensive line coach Travian Robertson, who is involved in a car crash in the past few days, and he is okay, which is the good news. I think everyone is just so thankful for that it wasn't worse than what it is. And Shane Beamer did say he's going to be okay, but he will not be in Atlanta on Sunday as he still recovers from that crash. But just your thoughts on this, because that is a storyline going into week one, and we are so glad that Travian is okay.
Yeah, first and foremost, like you said, it's awesome that he's okay. It's unfortunate that he won't be there. I know how badly he wants to be there. Like the defensive line throughout fall camp, because most often where we shoot from, they usually work the closest to where we are. So I'd say out of all the position groups and out of all the position coaches, I've seen Travian the most, and I see how involved he is with those guys, the feedback, the communication that goes back and forth. He's very involved with that unit. So I know they're going to definitely be missing his very vocal presence on the sideline. But one thing Shane Beamer did allude to is that, they have Nick Barrett, a guy who's been there as long as Beamer has himself, longer than Robertson. So there's some experience there. And I can say, along with Travian, the next most vocal guy from when I've been on the sideline watching them at fall camp, it was Barrett.
It was Barrett, and that's good news for the Gamecocks. Shane Beamer also saying in his press conference that they do expect Travian to be back this season. It's not, he's not going to miss the whole season for his injuries. He just needs some time to recover. So thoughts and prayers, big time out to Travian. Hope the recovery goes well, and obviously, the Gamecocks are going to welcome him back with open arms whenever he is fully healthy, and just really glad that he's okay. The other big news, of course, this week is Rahsul Faison, the running back for South Carolina, and this ongoing saga, Jared, is over.
It's over.
It is over.
No more.
No more. This was the big breaking news on Monday that the NCAA approved the waiver for Faison to play this season for South Carolina starting on Sunday. And a lot of people, maybe rolling their eyes saying, of course they waited until the week of. But good news no matter what for South Carolina. But a lot of people actually surprised, Jared, that it did happen before the season. We didn't know when there was going to be some resolution to this Faison saga, but he is good to go. He's going to play on Sunday against Virginia Tech and going to play the rest of the season. But this is amazing news for South Carolina and huge when you think about the running back room, because he's going to be maybe the guy this year at that position.
Yeah, along with him and Oscar Attaway.
Yeah.
Expect a lot of touches out of those two. It is interesting you mentioned that because we were getting really close. 6 days before the season, we got an answer, but it was funny because Luke Doty did mention on that Monday, he said Rahsul has always been smiling, like happy dude, just taking it one day at a time, regardless of what news he was waiting for. But he said on that Monday, Rahsul was just smiling a little bit more before the decision came out. And when we talked to Faison, he showed no doubt at all, at least in hindsight. I don't know how he was during the process, but in hindsight, it didn't sound like he expected anything to go in any other way than how it actually turned out.
Yeah, and great news for him. This is a guy coming to South Carolina from Utah State, where he had over 1,100 rushing yards last year, 8 touchdowns for Utah State. So the guy has results, and he is a great, great player. So when you think about on the field, this is going to be another addition for South Carolina that is just going to make that room even better. And Shane Beamer's actually been very big on the running backs room.
Yeah.
He said even if they didn't have Faison, that he really thought that they were elite, and now just having Rahsul is going to make them even better. But with something like this, this has been going on for how many months, Jared? Months upon months upon months, 8 months. All of 2025,
Yeah.
This has been going on. And so there has to be an emotional toll for everybody of this cat and mouse game of what's going to happen. Is he going to play? Is he going to be good? For Faison, is it, what is my future? He's playing and he's practicing and he doesn't really know when the green light's going to come on. So there has to be an emotional part of that. But we did get to speak to Faison today for the first time since this waiver has been approved. So here is Faison on his thoughts on this kind of roller coaster of a case, and Shane Beamer also sharing his thoughts on having Faison officially cleared and, as he says, free to play with the Gamecocks.
Yeah, it was a lot of ups and downs for sure, but for the most part, I was in good spirits through it all because I've been here with my teammates, my coaches, Coach Beamer, Coach Black, and then obviously my family. They played a major part. So people around me just kept me high, and then I've been through worse. So I felt like I had faith that it would happen and the NCAA would do the right thing. So I'm just blessed that they granted me an extra year.
It was awesome. You're optimistic, but until you hear, you don't know. And this week it was getting to be crunch time, obviously, because it's game week and you need an answer one way or another because you're getting ready for a game literally during that week. I was really proud of Sewell, how he handled this whole situation, and it never, if it affected him, he never showed it. He was the same guy each and every day and just went out there and worked and got better. That was a awesome phone call to make. Aaron Abbey called me and told me that we got word that he was cleared and that I could let Sewell know. And it was, what day was that, Monday? And he was at home already in the afternoon. So I FaceTimed him and told him. And that was a pretty cool moment that I won't forget, just seeing the joy in his face. And all he kept saying was just thank you, thank you, thank you, because he's so appreciative for the opportunity. He came and saw me yesterday just to thank me again as well, which is awesome. So that was a really special moment and a lot of emotions. And then certainly it makes a room that was already good, in my opinion, even better. And I told you guys, I believe last week that, or I know I've said it publicly, that whether Sewell was eligible or not, we were going to play multiple running backs. And now that he's eligible, he's going to play. And then there'll be other guys in that room that will also play. So it makes a room that I was really excited about already. Makes that room even better and gets me even more excited to just add to the depth and the personnel in that running back room.
So great news for South Carolina that Faison is going to be ready to roll on Sunday, and I think everyone's going to have, their cameras ready for when he takes the field the first time. in a Gamecock jersey. Now, when we talk about the rest of the press conference today, honestly, there really weren't that many like deep questions, I think, for this first game. I was a little surprised at that. And I mean that in the sense of a lot of times with the big press conferences, it's going to be all kinds of things. I don't know if there's a ton of storylines that are getting a ton of attention, Jared, when it comes to this. But the big one is the depth chart discussion. That was really the big topic of the day in the press room. And that's because Shane Beamer did not release a depth chart. So a lot of people wondering why. Like, what does that mean? Is he playing some games, with Virginia Tech, yada, yada, yada. But he said it's not the case and that he really they have so many positions that are still in play. And he said, Jared, that he actually called Brent Pry, the Virginia Tech head coach, to tell him that, I'm not trying to do anything shady. I'm not trying, if Pry releases his and Beamer doesn't, he didn't want it to be like, okay, what is Shane doing down there in Columbia? It's just that there's a lot of positions still in play. But I know you had a question about the depth chart. A lot of other reporters had a question about the depth chart. So what did you take away from what Beamer had to say regarding that?
Well, it is what it is. I'm taking what he said at face value. I really do think they have a lot to play.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a little less to play for than he lets on, because I did ask him, I was like, hey, how many of the starting positions are there left to play for? He alluded that, Lenora Sellers is pretty comfortable at QB1, but aside from that, everything's up for grabs. I don't think we actually, believe that there's question marks at 21 out of the 22 positions. We kind of know. They have an idea, but I do think, when you go down the depth chart, maybe it's not all three starting receivers, but maybe that third spot to start is up for grabs. Maybe, we don't know what type of lineup they're going to put out there. They might put two tight ends out there. I think it's probably things like that, there's probably still some questions about, but there's definitely more done than he alluded to.
Yeah, and Beamer did say, too, that if he did release a depth chart, it would be full of and/ors, and he just really wanted to avoid all the discussions around it, making doubts within his team, all that kind of stuff. So he just thought it was better for him and for his team if he just didn't release one this week. But he did say it wasn't anything, to be shady or cause any gamesmanship. But that was definitely the hottest topic at the press conference today. And I'm always interested, Jared, because I always want this podcast to give a little bit of insight into like behind the scenes of it all. Is I find different types of reporters ask different type of questions. And I don't know if you guys listen to press conferences this season, I think you'll start to notice it. For us as TV people, we're looking for sound bites for our news shows, for our sports shows, and not even really regarding the podcast, but really just for TV purposes. Yeah. We need sound bites that are 20, 25 seconds that are going to work for a generic audience, So for me, my goal when I go into a press conference, I'm going to lean more towards the generic side because we need a sound bite or two that's going to appeal to the general public regarding, for everyone who maybe is not a diehard football X's and O's fan. And so that just really works in that medium. For the beat writers, they ask really specific questions because they're writing a very specific story about a specific player, so they're going to go into the injuries, into super specifics. And I just find it interesting, the different types of reporters, the different types of journalism that are going on in the room. And I think it's great. I just think it's cool to see the different mediums and how they ask questions and kind of what they're leaning towards. And it's fun. Anyway, I just didn't know if you guys listen to press conferences going forward, you might be able to tell, okay, he's TV, he's newspaper, he's online. So it's a lot of fun. Anything else you want to say about the depth chart before we kind of go to the next topic?
Big thing, special teams. I know that's been something he said he wanted to get figured out. He said he's figured it out a little bit more since August 1st up to this point. But that's I think, the biggest question mark, because I'd say usually with most teams, as far as kicking competitions go, you kind of know who your guy is 6 days out. So the fact that we still don't know, I don't know if that's saying anything about it being a close competition or if they're not kicking as well as he liked, like he alluded to a bit. So that's a big question mark there.
Yeah, and we'll see, what the special teams looks like on Sunday, because that, like you said, that is a big question mark, and it'll be interesting to see what they look like when they take the field in Atlanta. South Carolina and Virginia Tech have an interesting history because it does go back about a century, but not a ton of games between the two programs. So just to kind of break it down for you guys, they've only played each other 20 times by my calculations. Yes, 20, doing the math here with the series history. South Carolina does lead all time 11-7-2. There's 2 ties in there with these 2 teams. However, they haven't played, Jared, since September 21st of 1991, when South Carolina beat the Hokies 28-21. And, then there was some conference realignments and things. But even Shane Beamer pointed it out in his press conference that for a few years, this was an every year thing, South Carolina and Virginia Tech. But from the late 80s to 1991, they played very consistently, but they have not played since. Jared, I was not even a month old when that game took place on September 21st, 1991. You were not alive when that game happened. So just to give some context on how long it's been between these 2 programs, and I think that makes this fun. I think it makes it fun to see 2 programs who haven't played in a long time. But an interesting thing, obviously, there's not any recent history between these 2 programs, but they've played 4 times on neutral sites, and Virginia Tech has won 3 of those games. So this is a neutral site game on Sunday. I don't know if you guys take any of this history, seriously, considering it's been 34 years since they played, but Virginia Tech does have the bragging rights right now when it comes to neutral sites. But I'm very interested in this matchup, especially for Shane Beamer. A lot of emotions for him surrounding this. It's his alma mater. It's the school where his dad, became a coaching legend. So I do think there's going to be an emotional aspect of this game. But Jared, I'm also interested to see how South Carolina sets the tone on Sunday, because I actually went back and listened to Shane Beamer's press conference after the Old Dominion game last year to see what his thoughts were after that season opener, where South Carolina did not look great. It was, in his words, a sloppy game. They won, they had to really claw that game out. Yeah. And a lot of people were nervous after that game, saying, okay, what does this mean for the rest of the season? He said they were a young team, that just kind of came out nervous. There were a lot of things, and there are a lot of nerves when it comes to the first game of the season for every team. But I'm really curious to see, especially with LaNorris having a season under his belt, how do they set the tone this season? Do they come out with a bang, or are they going to come out sloppy? Is it going to be rough? There are going to be kinks. There are going to be mistakes. It's game 1. But I just want to see what statement is made in week 1 from South Carolina.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that Old Dominion game, because last week we had LaNorris Sellers for media availability, and when he was asked about, some plays and moments he watches back from last season, he said he's pretty good with watching everything, but he said that Old Dominion game is still a hard watch for him.
Really?
Yeah. So
I think it was a hard watch for everyone in the moment. I'm not going to lie to you.
So it's interesting you bring that up. He seems to have obviously gotten over it. After you go ahead and win 9 games, I think you won't hold it as closely. But I think, like you said, it was a young team. Now you have a returning quarterback, which is going to play a huge difference maker. And not just that, I think we've seen LaNorris Sellers rise to the occasion. I think this is a moment where you can't have kind of a marquee matchup, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You're going to be the only one playing at that time. Mm-hmm. I think this is a moment where this is an occasion to rise to. It may not be the best of the best, like, that Clemson game at the end of the year, but it's still a moment. And I think Sellers has shown a good job in recent history of really rising to the occasion.
Yeah, and I think there's got to be some expectations for all teams in this first week. There's going to be mistakes that are made. There's going to be, just some things that you're going to have to work through, but it's more about, I don't know, the energy and how they respond to things, and do they look clean in certain areas? Because last year, even Shane said it was rough. It was a rough season opener, and I don't think South Carolina wants to have that again in 2025. But anyway, at the press conference today, I did ask Shane Beamer about the tone that he wants to see from his team on Sunday, and here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I think we said it a lot last year, and it's the same thing now, just be who we are, and I mean that, like, going into the game and the way that we play. Like, don't all of a sudden start acting different now because it's game week. Players and coaches, be who we are. And in game 1s, because it is the first time doing it for real, there's going to be, I don't want to say kinks, but there's things that happen that you got to work out, during the game, because it is game 1. And just be a team that, plays with great poise throughout the game, no matter what's happening, good or bad. You just continue to play with poise and confidence, and then be the team that we want to be, just in our style of play and how we execute and the effort, physicality that we want to play with.
Virginia Tech is an interesting team as we kind of shift our focus now to what the Hokies are going to bring to the table on Sunday. They did have a good season last year. They made it to a bowl game, but it was an okay year. You know, they were a good team. But one thing I thought that, and they have a really good quarterback who we'll talk about in a second, and he's a veteran quarterback, which is always big when it comes to college football. But one thing that I thought stood out from Shane at the press conference today was watching film and preparing for this first game of the season, which I never really thought about before, you know, because of the way college football is in 2025. Virginia Tech has a lot of new faces and a lot of new players on their team. So
two new coordinators. So there's a lot of newness with the Hokies. And Shane was saying that he actually doesn't just have to go back and watch Virginia Tech. He's got to go back and say, okay, this player played at Rice, this player played at Wake Forest, this player played at West Virginia, whatever the school is, and then he has to go back and find those games, find those specific players, and then it's hard and it's exhausting, and there's a lot of research and time that has to go into this first game specifically because there's so many new players, and that's probably the case for a lot of college football players, but this Virginia Tech team does have a lot of new pieces from last year, and in this college football landscape, it's one of those teams where you say, okay, you can look at last season, but you also got to look at these new pieces and what they bring to the Hokies program. Yeah, it's interesting because he brought up something that I never really thought about before, is just even something as simple as the numbers. What number did they wear at their last program, or even players on the team that have changed numbers, because I know a lot of times from scouting, you don't necessarily scout and say, oh, this is Kyron Drones right here. This is so-and-so. This is this number. This is that number. So the fact that even transferring from one number to another presents a challenge is another interesting aspect to watch about how challenging this week one can be.
Yeah, and I think South Carolina's going to be well prepared, but I also really am curious to see how the Gamecock defense, which, you know, we're all curious to see how they're going to look after all those pieces went to the NFL, how they deal with Virginia Tech's quarterback, because he does have experience. He's a really good player. Shane, you know, spoke about just the level of talent and actually compared him to Lenore Sellers and that they do have similarities. So I thought that was a big statement from Beamer today.
That's something we've seen among, even speaking to the players today, the defensive side, they compared Drones to Lenoris a lot as well. So I think obviously they'll probably take their guy first, but it's been a very interesting week to see, okay, kind of similar quarterbacks. They can get it done staying in the pocket, but I think Drones rushed almost 100. I think it was at 98 last year, rushing attempts last year. So you have to be ready for that rush because you know he can run, and if you let him go unchecked, he will take it all the way.
Yeah, so it'll be a fun little QB battle to see what's going on in Atlanta. The other part of this matchup that is interesting is the relationship between Brent Pry and Shane Beamer, because they have known each other for a very long time, Jared. Brent Pry is Virginia Tech. I mean, even Beamer said that today. He was a grad assistant when Beamer was on the Virginia Tech team. So their relationship and their friendship goes back many, many years. There's so much respect there between Shane and Brent and really the Beamer family. And I think that makes this game feel, I don't know, it doesn't feel as tense as a game day can be, because you do know that obviously they're going to be strapped up and ready to go and play, you know, once the kickoff goes and on Sunday. But I do think that mutual respect makes this a friendly rivalry and a friendly matchup to start the season, which is kind of nice, because when you look at some of these other matchups week one, I don't really get those vibes from everything. It's kind of, you know, game face on, we're ready to take them down. This game, they obviously both want to win and they're going to come ready to go, but there is a respect level there that makes this unique.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talk about those week one matchups, and in a number of matchups, some of these marquee matchups across the nation, like Ohio State, Texas, for example, it has not seemed as friendly between the teams.
Clemson, LSU, I mean,
that has not seemed very friendly. I mean, it's not getting nasty, but it definitely doesn't have like this.
No kumbaya.
Exactly. But it is interesting because just the fact that these two programs haven't played in over 30 years, but there's shares so many connections, especially, of course, through the Beamer family. It's kind of interesting to see, I guess, where life could take you for all these different routes and the coaches having these connections. But it is pretty cool to be dealing with a game day environment that's not so tense, and the players don't seem tense either.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Virginia Tech, they had their press conference a day early this week, a day earlier than South Carolina did, and Brent Pry had nothing but praise for South Carolina, nothing but praise for what Shane Beamer has done, and specifically when it comes to LaNorris Sellers, Brent Pry says he is the real deal.
First of all, I think the hype surrounding LaNorris is accurate. You watch the Clemson game, you watch the Missouri game. I mean, this guy just, whether he's throwing it and certainly doing it with his legs, he's very hard to tackle. He's got great field presence. He's a great competitor, and he's got tremendous size. He's an impressive athlete. And I remember when he was coming out, I believe he was committed somewhere else and flipped to South Carolina, and everybody was kind of curious about what type of player, what type of quarterback he was going to be. But they've done a great job with him. I think he's a pretty special guy. Obviously, we have to have a plan for him.
So the respect is great between Shane Beamer and Brent Pry, and they're going to be ready to go and hopefully give us a great game to start the season on Sunday. I hope so too. It's going to be a good one. And we'll give you guys our predictions here in a couple of minutes. But first, we're going to take a timeout, and we're going to hear more about what the Hokies are bringing to the table on Sunday. Right after this, our Claire Foley spoke with a reporter from Virginia who covers the Hokies, and he's going to give us some really expert insight onto what the Hokies are bringing to this game on Sunday. South Carolina Sideline returns right after this. This is our first Game Day preview episode, which is awesome. And what we're going to do every single week on our Game Day previews is have a conversation with someone on the other side of things. So every single week with the matchup that South Carolina has, we're going to get an expert opinion about their opponent. And this week, of course, South Carolina taking on Virginia Tech, which is what this episode is all about. And our Claire Foley spoke with Dave Walls from WSET in Lynchburg, Virginia, a longtime reporter in Virginia who's covered the Hokies for a long time. And she got to pick his brain about what Virginia Tech looks like this season and what they're bringing to Sunday's matchup against South Carolina.
I'm joined now by the sports director at our sister station, WSET, up in Lynchburg, Virginia. Also a good friend of mine, Dave Walls. Dave is in a fun market there where he gets to cover big name teams like Liberty University, UVA, but also what we're going to be talking about today, the Virginia Tech Hokies. So Dave, really excited to have you with us today. This is our first time we're having someone out of the South Carolina market on the South Carolina Sideline podcast. So if you want to just start by giving our listeners a little background about how you got to Lynchburg and all the stuff you do there.
Sure, and excited to be the first non-South Carolinian to be on, so that's exciting. So I've been here at ABC 13 WSET for over 12 years now, and found my way, honestly, as a former college football player at the University of Delaware, and found my way to Lynchburg working through media, and been here covering, Liberty, University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, even VMI. This is a football-rich area, not just Virginia Tech, but certainly, 3 to 4 D1 programs who have a very dedicated fan base. So certainly we're just entering the busy time of year right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the time that we don't see our families and just live at work, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Or
very
in our
understanding
cars.
families, absolutely.
And to give you guys some context, Dave and I know each other because my first job out of school was at WSET. So we worked at the same station. We were both weekend warriors when I was on the news side. So had a lot of fun together during my year that I was in Virginia. Now, Dave, I know that from your time there, you were there for the end of Frank Beamer's era at Virginia Tech. So what do you remember about that time, and how much does the Beamer family really mean to Virginia Tech?
Yeah, I actually started, like you said, right at the end of Frank Beamer's. In fact, the only Frank game I actually covered was his last one, which was the Shreveport Independence Bowl, which is a 55-52 wild game against Tulsa that they won. But, even now, 10 years later, Frank Beamer is Virginia Tech football. His legacy looms large in Blacksburg, looms large over the ACC. And I would also say looms large just because of what they accomplished when Frank was in Blacksburg and kind of what the team hasn't accomplished yet in his wake. They had an early ACC Coastal Division title in 2016, but then we saw the team continually slide down up through until 2020. Justin Fuentes' departure, which a lot of the fan base was happy to see, but that I think hoping for more under Brent Pry, the gains have been very small and incremental and filled with lots of disappointment. So clearly, this is a pivotal year, not just for Coach Brent Pry, who fans I think would arguably say he is on the hot seat for sure, but certainly for where this program is, 10 years now since Frank's gone, we're heavily into the NIL era. How does Virginia Tech continue to adapt and push forward to put themselves back in a position where they are one of the more preeminent programs in the ACC rather than just somebody resting on their laurels and happy to be in the middle of the pack?
And I think two things stood out to me today when Shane Beamer was giving his weekly press conference. One thing he said was that he thought Virginia Tech last year was a lot better than their record. He said if a couple things went another way, they could have very well been a 9-3 team. Do you see that they're maybe on the cusp of something here? And along with that, another thing that Beamer mentioned was they have 30 transfers coming in. So in that way, there's a lot of unknown.
You're absolutely right. If you look at last year, there were so many games where a turnover here, converting a long drive there, there were some very winnable games that Virginia Tech let slip through their fingers. Like you said, their record was what it was, but a play here, play there, they're picking up an additional 2 to 3 wins. And we're talking about them in a much higher esteem than where they are right now. So absolutely. I know injuries really ravaged this team in the second half of the year. Kyron Drones wasn't healthy and they were on second and third string backs and the line was beat up. So, but every team kind of battles that. So, certainly missing your starting quarterback hurts, but there were a lot of other areas where this team really had a chance to close out some wins and didn't. As far as this year's go, one thing Brent Pry has done very well is not just recruit, but recruit heavily in the state of Virginia. Frank Beamer, when you talk about what he did, there are parts of the state that Virginia Tech owned, particularly the eastern side of the market, Virginia Beach. He would always say, we're recruiting the 757, that area code, hard. Coaches would literally say, hey, Virginia Tech, here's our best players, go at it. Other schools knew they didn't have a chance, and the team got away from that in the years that followed. So Brent Pry's done a great job of rebuilding that trust, getting more high-profile transfers, and also big recruits from the state of Virginia. So it's not an instant turnaround, but certainly now the depth is certainly there in some areas that maybe it hasn't been before.
You mentioned Drones, his injury last year. What does he need to do to get back to his 2023 self where he had such a good year?
Yeah, I think one thing that Drones and the rest of this team has talked about is the fact that the chemistry was not there last year, not just, quarterback to receiver, but in every position group. There was a sense of me over we, of putting individual gains first because the players didn't necessarily believe they had what it took to win. They were focusing on getting their stats, getting out. Everybody across the board has said, that's not the case. The chemistry in practice is much better. Plays are flowing, whether it's blocking schemes, passing routes. Everything is being executed at a much higher level. And that's something that, quite frankly, Kyron needs. If it's going to be on his feet the whole time, he's going to be in trouble. He needs to be able to have not just a back in the backfield like he had Bashal Tootin for the last few years, but he didn't necessarily have the consistent passing threats. And so it was a lot of ground game. It was a lot of, it's either Tootin or it's going to be Drones on his feet. There wasn't a consistent passing threat. He needs to have all of it, all put together so they can't zero in on him. It looks like they may have much more of a balance this year, and that's going to be a big factor into how successful he is.
And something that's unknown, at least right now, going into Sunday, is Caleb Woodson, just named captain last week. Now it was just announced today that he was arrested with a DWI. In history, I'm not even sure if this is something you would know. How does Virginia Tech typically handle these situations? Is it wait until it's resolved in the legal system, then they take their consequences for their players, or do you think he'll play on Sunday, basically?
I don't know that at least during my tenure that I've seen a DWI. There have been players who have been arrested for various reasons, some of them serious. And for the serious ones, it is suspension off the team until further notice. So if they follow that history, the one I'm thinking of was under Justin Fuente, so I can't quite say for sure. But historically speaking, this is probably a case where he does not play on Sunday. I already know that the Hokies have stripped him of that captaincy that they had already just given him last week. That's now off the table and likely not to come back. But as far as his future on this team, I think they're going to just keep that under wraps. I would suspect we don't see him for the immediate future until he at least has a hearing, until we get a little bit further in this process. And, you lose a captain before, you even get to week one. That's a big blow. Even if it's not an on-the-field blow, it's certainly a psychological blow to have one of your leaders suddenly gone and not on the sideline with you.
For sure. And especially a year where there is at least some sort of change in terms of the personnel, both on the field and on the sidelines, 2 new coordinators. Beamer said today that for him, it presented a challenge because neither of them were in college football last year. What do you think they bring to the table?
I think they bring the new blood and the new energy that, frankly, this program has needed. Things had been very stagnant. And I think another way they're trying to, Brent Pry is finally trying to put his stamp on the way he wants things done with this team. There has been this, I don't want to say holdover, but certainly this mindset that has been stuck in like, well, this is Virginia Tech and this is how we do things. And I think Brent Pry is going, you know what, if we're going to be successful, and if I'm, going to be able to coach this team, I have to be able to do things my way and bring in his guys. The one thing I like that Brent Pry did was, he maintained a lot of the connections to Virginia Tech, but at the same time, it didn't feel like 100% the way I think we thought Brent Pry was going to change this team, right? It was very, just the offense was stagnant. The defense didn't really wow anybody. There just didn't seem to be a lot of that energy behind this team. And so with 2 new coordinators, things are going to look different. And it's going to put everyone on notice that this is not the same Virginia Tech team that you've seen these past few years. This is, I don't want to put an overemphasis on this game, but this is one that even if Virginia Tech doesn't win, this is one that's got to stay close. They had flashes last year. You look at the Miami game against Cam Ward. That's one that arguably they should have won. They have a chance to close that thing out. Miami's able to rally back late. But this is a game that I think you have to have a strong enough showing to have optimism moving forwards into week 2 and 3 and 4. If I had to pick a winner in this one, I think I would say it's about a 31-21 South Carolina. I don't know that Tech early on, even though they've got a lot of depth, especially on the defensive line side of the ball, they've got 14 or so players, I think, just listed on the D line. So they're going to be able to be fresh. They're going to be able to sub out, and they're going to be able to create a lot of headaches on the run. I don't know that they've got the rest of the staff necessary to be able to shut down an offense like South Carolina, who's got so many weapons on them. So, but I think, you let Kyron Jones get some space, let him get some numbers, let this team, if they can get a couple turnovers, make it close. I think a close loss still does a lot for this Virginia Tech squad and sets them up, but it's got to stay that way. I think if you start getting into the 3 touchdown plus range, I think now you're looking at trouble. So for Virginia Tech, 31-21 South Carolina, but that still gives them plenty of momentum to move forward from here.
I want to thank Dave Walls for being our first non-Gamecock guest on our podcast. So really appreciate him coming on our podcast and giving us his thoughts on the Hokies. Really great insight, and he's got so much experience covering this team. So his opinion is great and is true, and he's gonna give us all the good stuff when it comes to the Hokies. And fun fact, Claire Foley's first job was at WSET in Lynchburg, Virginia. So they know each other well, and we're all connected here in the journalism world, which is fun. We're gonna take one more break here on South Carolina Sideline. Up next, Jared and I will give you our predictions for Sunday's game in Atlanta and our final thoughts on South Carolina versus Virginia Tech. Time for our predictions and final thoughts as South Carolina and Virginia Tech get ready for their season opener on Sunday. I'm still kind of in a daze. I still can't believe that game day is here. I still can't believe, here. I know, finally here, and I can't believe it always, I feel like, sneaks up on us, and then it's like get on the roller coaster and ready to go. But Jared, I don't know, do you want to go first, or you want me to go first with our predictions for Sunday?
I'll go first.
Go first.
I'm interested in seeing how closely ours align.
I know, we've been doing that a lot recently, which is crazy.
Unintentionally. But I'm thinking it's going to be a not close 27-20 win in South Carolina's favor. I say that because 27-20 sounds close, but I think it's going to be one of those more like Gamecocks up 27-13. Virginia Tech scores a late touchdown, but that's where I have it. 27-20 Gamecocks.
Nice. All right. I'm going South Carolina as well. And it is crazy how similar our predictions are. And we do not talk about this stuff before we get on the podcast. I'm also picking South Carolina to start their season with a win. I'm going 24-14 just because it's the first week of the season. I do think for both sides, we're going to see some mistakes. We're going to see some rust, knocking out the kinks of everything. But I do think South Carolina is going to win. I think Lenoris is going to come out ready to go in this first game. And I just don't think Virginia Tech's going to have enough for South Carolina in this game. I also think it being at a neutral site makes it a little different. You know, it's not a home game really for either team. So that might play a part, especially at the beginning, getting used to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is huge, by the way. If you've never been to that stadium, it is a massive place. So it might take both teams a minute to get settled. So I'm actually kind of expecting a slower start from both. And then I think once they get comfortable, I think both teams will start to get into it. And then I think South Carolina is going to walk away with a 10-point victory. I don't really see this one being close, but I'd like you. I don't see it being a blowout either. I think it's going to be a comfortable season opener for South Carolina. So yeah, we're both picking the Gamecocks. Anything else, Jared, that you want to say about this matchup as we get ready for Sunday's kick at 3 o'clock in Atlanta?
Man, I'm just ready to see Nick Harbor because they've talked a lot about Nick Harbor. We know he has the speed, but now with him focusing completely on football instead of doing both football and track, I want to see what he has. Luke Doty today said he looked like Xavier Legette with his work ethic and whatnot, and everyone's been raving about Nick, so I'm ready to see, what this offseason has yielded for him.
It does feel like Nick is ready for a breakout season. He's been progressing, and of course he's been doing track and field as well, which is so hard to be a dual athlete in college. But I do think it feels like it's time for him to have his big game, his breakout game. So I'm with you. I'm excited to see Nick. I'm also really excited to see the defense, and I'm curious to see, if Dylan Stewart has starts the season with a bang. There's been a lot of hype regarding him as well. He had an unbelievable freshman season. What are the improvements he's made? Now that, Kennard and all the veterans are in the NFL, it feels like Dylan's time to shine with all the hype he's getting. What statement is he going to make on Sunday when it comes to this defense, as he is the face of this team? We've given you guys our predictions, and we've given you guys all of our thoughts. Bring me back on this camera because I want to talk to the people right now about our game day previews. Every single week, I want to know your thoughts. What are you thinking regarding South Carolina, Virginia Tech? Give us your predictions. Give us your score lines. Give us your biggest storylines, your biggest question marks, your biggest reactions, because this podcast is very interactive. We want to know what you guys have to say because we talk and we talk a lot, but we want to talk with you guys. So leave us your predictions, leave us your questions, leave us your thoughts in the comments. If you think we're morons, let us know. We want to know it all. If you think we're geniuses, let us know, because this podcast is all fun at the end of the day. It's all sports at the end of the day. We're just having a good time hanging out here on the sideline. Jared, it's been fun, our first game day preview. I'm excited for Sunday's game in Atlanta. You and I are going down for that game, and we'll be doing our next episode from the literal sideline of Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So I'm excited for a remote episode of our podcast that will be released this weekend with our reaction to the game. But South Carolina and Virginia Tech kick off at 3 o'clock on Sunday at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. All eyes are going to be on this game, Jared. I can't wait for the college football season to get going. I can't wait for South Carolina to hopefully prove something to the country that they're number 13 and that ranking's not just going to be based off last season, that this year's team is legit as well. And I'm excited to see what Virginia Tech brings to the game as well. And I hope it's a good one. I hope it's competitive. I hope that everyone has fun. If you're going to Atlanta, enjoy the game. If you're watching from Columbia or wherever you guys are listening to us from, enjoy the game. It's college football, baby, and it's here.
I'm ready for week one.
I'm ready for week one as well. He's Jared Parker. I'm Matt Dowell. Thank you guys always for watching and listening to us. Make sure you rate, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff here on South Carolina Sideline. We'll see you after the game for a reaction episode from the Gamecocks versus the Hokies from Atlanta. See you guys. Have a good one.